Jeanne D'Arc, an illiterate teenage girl who could talk to saints and believed that she was a holy warrior chosen by God. Was she mentally ill? Possibly. Did she have a pair of giant balls and changed history forever? Definitely. Wait, actually, I need to make sure you understand that me saying Jeanne d'Arc had a pair of giant balls is not literal. That should be obvious, but there's a new wave of people who believe that Jeanne d'Arc was trans. So just so you know, not actual balls on this girl, metaphorical balls. And with her metaphorical balls, Jeanne d'Arc changed history forever by liberating France from England, and then she was murdered for it, all before the age of 19. Yeah, at the age I kind of found out how to watch porn without my parents finding out. Jeanne d'Arc had already saved her country. The story of Jeanne d'Arc, who you might know better as Joan of Arc if you're an English speaker and anglicize the name, her story is as unbelievable as it is inspiring, and it all started in 1412 when a super religious woman named Isabelle Romée got impregnated by the richest boy in the village, Jacques d'Arc. And when I say the richest guy in the village, I mean Jacques had 50 acres of farmland in a village where just owning 3 pairs of shoes already put you amongst the elites. That tiny village was called Domremy, located in northeastern France, and the people there were so poor that when you saw someone carrying an empty bucket down the street and asked them what they're doing, they'd say, moving. The village was super poor, super small, but Jeanne d'Arc had it good on her 50 acres of farmland, learning how to take care of animals, how to sew, all while praying all day. And to make sure she could do all of that at full energy, she also had to get quality sleep. And for that, Jeanne d'Arc was known to use one of these bad boys, the Manta sleep mask. The best thing to ever happen to sleeping, honestly, and also the best thing to ever happen to Cyclops cosplay. You don't want to know how long it took me to edit that. And I don't even know if I have it on perfectly right now because I can't check. I can't see anything. This is blacked out dark, guys. I can't see a thing. This is a darkness, a game changer when it comes to sleeping. And I mean, let me not talk about it. Let me show you what it looks like in action. Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. So I have the Manta sound mask right here, which has Bluetooth speakers. That's just really an extra on top because I'm a baller, shot caller, 20-inch rims on the Impala, But there are other Manta sleep mask models. There's the standard model, there's the weighted model, there's the steaming model, the cooling model. And when I'm talking steaming, cooling, weighted, I'm talking about these eye cups here. The sound model, for example, has these C-shaped eye cups. And man, they hug me like my mama never hugged me. And the thing about these really is that they're so soft, they don't annoy you while you're sleeping. You can sleep with these just fine, and thanks to the sound, you can fall asleep listening to your favorite podcast, music, or I can fall asleep with my videos running so I can get my views up. Also, these headphones, they don't have that annoying battery low or off sound because real G's moving silence like lasagna. Basically, the Manta sound mask, all the Manta sleep masks, completely changed my nap game. I nap more than ever while I should be writing or editing my videos. Thanks, Manta Sleep. I know. Helpful, but I'm really napping more than ever because I'm getting the best sleep with these. And with my code, you can get this 10% cheaper using the code BRIEFED, and the link in my description below, and even up to 30% cheaper if you get the Black Friday deal, the holiday deal, or the New Year deal. And basically that makes them so cheap, and that's how even Jeanne d'Arc was able to afford them, because even though she was super poor, she valued her quality sleep, and Manta made it possible. And with that quality sleep, she could then pray like a boss. And Jeanne d'Arc had serious reason to prey because she was born in the middle of the 100-Year War and her village was bordering enemy territory. But if you don't know anything about the 100-Year War, allow me to quickly explain. The war was basically a forever struggle between France and England because ever since William the Conqueror conquered people against their will, England was convinced that France was just England spelled wrong. They believed France was theirs, and every English king tried his best to add French king to his list of titles. That was actually going on long before the 100-Year War, which only started really in 1337 when England's King Edward III went to war against France to take over their country, but then realized that fighting was actually super exhausting, so he settled for occupying northern France after a couple of years. But then, when the French king Charles VI took the throne of the rest of France and turned out to be so insane that he thought he was made of glass, England was like,
"This guy? Seriously?"
And they teamed up with the powerful French region Burgundy, who turned traitor on their French cousins because they also didn't like wannabe Mr. Glass sitting on the throne and rather preferred themselves a bit of civil war. The combined powers of Burgundy and England now fought against France until, in 1420, France had enough and decided that the new English king, Henry V, will get to rule France and unite the countries once King Glass Charles VI is dead. Except then Henry V died before Glass Charles and left his son Henry VI behind, who was 9 months old and now the rightful heir to the throne, and the French were not about to follow up their Glass king with a toddler king like some bad sequel. So they refused him the throne, and England and Burgundy were back to occupying northern France, while a new French king, Charles VII, ruled the rest of France. But the problem was that to officially be the actual crowned king of France and legitimize his rule, Charles VII had to be crowned in a city called Reims. But that city was deep in northern France and was under Anglo-Burgundian control, and they decidedly did not want Charles VII to be crowned king of France and would rather see him dead. And that's the story of... That was the world that Jeanne d'Arc lived in Domremy, a tiny village in northeastern France, surrounded by the forces of England and Burgundy, but still loyal to the actual French crown, loyal to the OG France, aka a village in a very uncomfortable position. Jeanne, though, lived a quiet, unassuming life in Domremy until she turned 13 and puberty hit her a little bit different than it does most girls. Saints appeared to her and started talking to her. Saint Catherine of Alexandria, Saint Margaret of Antioch, and Saint Michael, to be exact. She had visions of all of them, and they told Jeanne, "I know you're turning into a woman now, and you feel that inner Tatiana trying to come out, right? But you must remain a forever virgin." And so Jeanne held on to her virginity like LeBron holds on to his hairline, and when she turned 16, the vision switched things up and told her, "Good job on staying a virgin. Now use that pent-up thirst energy to turn into a warrior and liberate France by making sure Charles VII gets to Reims and is crowned king." Jeanne didn't doubt that this was God talking to her, giving her a divine mission. I mean, her mother was so religious that she, the mother, was one of the few women in the 15th century France who completed the pilgrimage to Rome for her faith. At that time, that was like begging to be violated or worse, but Mama Jeanne d'Arc did it and her faith protected her. So Jeanne d'Arc, the teenager, had no doubt that her faith would protect her on this mission. And in May 1428, her visions told her to start that mission and go see King Charles in Chinon, a town that was 500 kilometers deeper in enemy English territory in northern France. Basically, the mission was straight up suicide, not just because Jeanne d'Arc was a teenager. It would have been impossible for anyone. But Jeanne d'Arc knew that she was chosen by God and destined to be victorious, so she set out on her own and first traveled to the nearest pro-King Charles town in Vaucouleurs, where she sought out the captain of the royal garrison, Robert de Baudricourt, and she told him, "Listen, I'm 16 years old and I've been chosen by God. I'm kind of going to save France, so I must speak with the king because I will defeat England and end the 100-year war." And General Baudricourt was like,
"Oh, okay. Oh, you crazy."
I am!
So Captain Baudricourt, he sent her back home, which, I mean, fair enough, to him some schizophrenic or something teenager with hallucinations is trying to meet with the most important person in France that he is sworn to protect. Obviously not happening. But back home, Jeanne d'Arc kept hearing those voices in her head and never doubted her holy mission. So even when her father, Jacques, tried to marry his daughter to a good Christian man, she said that she has to stay a forever virgin like the saints told her to be, and that she refuses to get married. So like any understanding father, he took his daughter to court to force her to follow his orders. But even in court, this teenager kept going on and on about the chastity vow she promised to the saints, that she has to stay single and that she has to talk to King Charles, for she is the one chosen to save France. And no matter what the court said, she wouldn't change her tone. Whatever they asked her, Jeanne d'Arc just repeatedly said, "I am the one." And remember, this is a village where having 3 pairs of shoes to your name makes you stand out. So a girl claiming to be the one chosen by God, it was the gossip of the year. That story spread like wildfire, and eventually all the villagers were talking about it, to the point that Jeanne d'Arc legit became a local celebrity. The virgin that will lead France to victory over England. And eventually, that gossip story turned into a prophecy that people truly believed in. And once it was prophecy, man, there was no stopping it anymore. Even France's enemies, England and Burgundy, they heard of this virgin savior and they were like,
"Is Wayne Brady gonna have to choke a bitch?"
So Burgundy attacked Jeanne d'Arc's village, just, roughed it up a little bit to scare the divine prophecy out of her and her people. But all that attack did was confirm that Jeanne d'Arc, she must be special. If their small, unimportant village of Domremy is now on the enemy radar, Jeanne d'Arc must truly be chosen. The attack legitimized Jeanne d'Arc, and she now became this living avatar of God. And with that level of celebrity, she returned to Captain Robert de Baudricourt in Vaucouleurs in February 1429. And she told him, "Look, I didn't want to have to do this. I was here about a year ago. I didn't want to have to pull that card, but I'm kind of the famous virgin that everybody's talking about. It sounds weird, don't overthink it. Just let me in." And of course, famous fame, even in the 15th century. So now Captain Baudricourt was happy to give this 17-year-old 6-armed man to escort her to Chinon to meet King Charles, proving once and for all that the only thing that separates crazy people from visionaries is fame.
"I just told you who I thought I was, a god."
Of course, there was more to the belief and trust people had in Jeanne d'Arc than just her fame. After decades of Anglo-Burgundian occupation of the north, dividing France both physically and mentally by not allowing Charles VII to be officially crowned, the French people were desperate. The army was broken, they were poor, and it was only a matter of time until England would take over all of France. England was already laying siege to the city of Orléans, which was an important city that, if conquered, would allow the England and Burgundy forces to have the perfect setup to expand beyond the north and take over the rest of France. And the problem was, the French, they were barely holding on to Orléans. The city was about to fall, they were tired, they were outmatched, and their enemy was just too powerful. France was desperate and they needed something. And then you have this gossip turning into prophecy that some virgin will save France from England. I mean, it was at least something to cling on to, a beacon of hope. And if anything, in these desperate times, that was worth giving a shot. So on February 13th, 1429, Jeanne d'Arc and her guard of 6 men rode out to Chinon, 500 kilometers into lawless enemy territory filled with violently thirsty men. So to not endanger herself and her entire fellowship, Jeanne d'Arc cut her hair, dressed like a man, and acted like one. Eating with the guys, sleeping next to the guys, washing with the guys. She did everything a man did, to the point that even her company saw her as just one of the guys. Over their 11 days journey to see King Charles in Chinon, no one laid a finger on her, and her boys grew to be absolutely loyal to this fearless 17-year-old girl risking her life for her country, riding into enemy territory. I mean, seriously, the balls on this 17-year-old girl, huge.
It's bigger than that, Chris. It's large.
And she dragged those massive cojones of hers all over town once she got to Chinon, so that King Charles VII immediately noticed her arrival, but the 26-year-old king refused to see her, which again, fair enough from his point of view. A teenage girl pretending to be a boy who claims God has chosen her and that's the spirits of the saints talk to her. Not exactly who you invite in for a friendly chat. Instead, the king snuck out in disguise one day, disguised as a common man, hidden amongst his entourage, just to catch a glimpse of this Jeanne d'Arc. But the moment he did, Jeanne d'Arc just walked straight towards him and introduced herself to His Majesty. Now, keep in mind, there are no photos at the time. Jeanne d'Arc is an illiterate girl from the poorest of villages. She has absolutely no clue what King Charles really looks like. Most people had no clue, much less when the man is disguised and trying not to be recognized. But Jeanne d'Arc, she still spotted him immediately and started talking crazy again. Hi, I'm Jeanne d'Arc. I'm 17 years old, and I can talk to the saints. And the saints told me to tell you that God told them that I need to tell you that you need to let me go to Orléans, because I will defeat the English, lift their siege, and then I'll make sure you get crowned as king of France and Reims. You get me? So they talked, and she convinced him, and he said she could go to Orléans if she also convinces all the important church authorities that she can really talk to the saints and was chosen by God. So the church questioned her for 3 weeks, but that's basically just a bunch of crazy people talking to another crazy person about imaginary things to see whose crazy is stronger. And Jeanne d'Arc's crazy was the strongest, because remember, so after 3 weeks of questioning her, and after physically examining if she is truly a virgin and did not consort with the devil, whatever that examination looks like, the church was convinced that Jeanne d'Arc was chosen to go to Orléans, lift the English siege, defeat them, and get King Charles VII crowned. And again, France, desperate. Sending a teenager to try and make a change was like, what's the worst that can happen? So they didn't even really give her an army. They just said that whoever volunteers can go with her. But what they forgot is that Jeanne d'Arc had turned into a living legend that became known as Jeanne, the Maiden. These were desperate times for all, and the desperate so often do find solace in religion. So to many people, Jeanne, the Maiden, was the only hope, the only solution they had left. And while the king thought he might be sending a teenage girl to her death with a handful of unimportant volunteers, in reality, 400 to 500 volunteer soldiers stepped up to accompany 17-year-old Jeanne d'Arc to Orléans to fight the English. So on April 29, 1429, she was leading what has to be considered her army to Orléans, riding on a white horse, waving a massive Christian banner. Man, this girl was on some real Gandalf and Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers thing. You get me? But once she got to Orléans, the men in charge took one look at her in her men's attire with her short hair, and they were like,
What are you, a girl or something?
they didn't respect her one bit. A teenage girl sent as their backup to a siege where the fate of Orléans, the fate of France is on the line. If anything, this was offensive. So they didn't accept Jeanne d'Arc's help, nor did they give her any information. They just wanted her to leave. But the problem was that Orléans had been under siege for half a year and already lost 2,000 of its 6,000 fighting men. The soldiers of Orléans were, again, desperate and looking for any sign of hope, anything to believe in. enter a teenage maiden who, legend has it, was chosen by God, riding in on a white horse, waving a Christian banner with 500 of loyal men following her of their own will. It didn't take long until all of Orleans' men abandoned the French generals that were leading the failure and swore loyalty to Jeanne d'Arc. And so, days after arriving in Orleans, on May 4th, 1429, Jeanne d'Arc had visions in her sleep that she had to attack the English now. Her voices told her to grab a sword, grab a banner, and get on her horse. So Jeanne d'Arc rode towards the nearest battle at an English stronghold, and her soldiers followed her. Jeanne d'Arc threw herself into the thick of battle, waving her banner, a shining beacon of God's will, a symbol of divine victory, and then she got hit with an arrow and went down. Yeah, this is still a teenage girl. This is still real life, folks. Don't get carried away. Except do get carried away, because this is Jeanne d'Arc we're talking about. I mean,
Put some respect on my name.
she pulled that arrow out of her soldier, and once the medics stopped the bleeding, Jeanne d'Arc was back on the battlefield that very same afternoon, just hours later, back at the front lines, waving her banner. And seeing this fearless teenage girl risking her life, overcoming injuries that would put others down for good, all the men were inspired. It didn't matter why, religion, pride, or desperation. This girl set off all the triggers in these soldiers, and they started fighting like men possessed, and won the battle against the English. And then Jeanne d'Arc led them to win another battle, and then she led them to win yet another battle. And 4 days later, on May 8th, 1429, the French, led by 17-year-old Jeanne d'Arc, had broken the siege of Orleans. They defeated the English and sent them running. The French had won, and Orleans was free, just as Jeanne d'Arc had predicted.
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
After their defeat, the English were fleeing the city. Not just their soldiers, but their families too, children and women, all of them. And the victorious French soldiers were like,
These fine women should be in for a bit of a rape.
but not on Jeanne d'Arc's watch. She ordered them that no woman was to be harmed, and that they were not even allowed to chase down and kill the soldiers, because it is Sunday, and good Christians don't fight on a Sunday. And these grown man soldiers, they listened to this teenage girl. When I tell you, Jeanne d'Arc was a straight up
Dog. He's a straight D-A-W-G.
But not only that, then Jeanne d'Arc even took a moment to cry over the death of the English, over the blood shed and the lives lost. But her compassion didn't deter her from her mission. The voices were still commanding her to ensure Charles VII is crowned as the King of France in Rheims, to legitimize his rule and to unite the country. She still had to get him deep into northern France, deep into enemy territory. Orleans was just the beginning, just one siege, but getting into Rheims, that was war. To get there, Jeanne d'Arc would have to attack and liberate a bunch of other French cities that were firmly under the control of England, and simply put, if her victory in Orleans seemed like a miracle, getting to Rheims, it was impossible. But not when you're convinced God is working through you. And so Jeanne d'Arc went to see Charles and told the king that she's gonna clear a path for him to Rheims. And, well, she cleared a path for him to Rheims. At 17 years old, Jeanne d'Arc led her men into every battle, waving her banner and inspiring a fighting spirit that was way over 9,000. With this teenage girl risking her life at the front lines alongside them, the French absolutely crushed the English in every battle, freeing town after town, Auxerre, Chalon, Troyes. Everybody got some French liberté, and all English were killed with the same égalité, to the point where the English were convinced that Jeanne d'Arc must be possessed by the devil. Because, I mean, God can't be working against them and for the French, right? Impossible. How can their god also be the enemy god? So obviously Jeanne d'Arc must be a liar possessed by the devil who enabled these deeds. Now at this point, I have to make it clear that yes, Jeanne d'Arc was leading all these troops, but she wasn't charging in, sword in hand, decapitating people. Nah. She was all about her presence, and just the fact that a teenager was present, risking her life, raising a Christian banner on the battlefield, it gave everybody an insane moral boost and a plus 20 on all their combat stats. Yes, Jeanne d'Arc was still wearing armor and carrying a sword, but that was more for emergencies only. So the French kept on winning until they absolutely clapped English cheeks on June 18th in 1429 at the Battle of Patay. I mean, they stomped them like it's English History X. You get me? 2,000 English died and less than 100 French lost their lives. So after that, the English fighting spirit was crushed and the path to Rheims was cleared. Jeanne d'Arc returned to King Charles to escort him to his crowning ceremony deep into enemy territory, where on July 17, 1429, King Charles VII was finally, officially crowned the King of France. In under 3 months, Jeanne d'Arc had done the impossible. A 16-year-old girl told everybody she would get King Charles VII crowned and legitimized as the ruler of France, and she did exactly that. This victory was hers and that of the men who fought alongside her, but King Charles, of course, was not shy to take all the credit. The king did the mandatory victory lap around the region to put his meat on the table and show everyone who's boss now. But Jeanne decided not to join the circle jerk. This was no time to celebrate, not when there were still French cities suffering under English occupation. Jeanne d'Arc believed that all people deserved to be liberated. Her mission didn't just end with the king getting his crown, but the king did believe that her mission should end with him getting the crown. Now that King Charles was officially King of France, had his crown, he immediately opened peace negotiations with Burgundy to lure them away from the losing English side and back onto the winning French side. King Charles decided that the rest of this war was not going to be won by shedding more blood in battles, but by making deals in politics. Jeanne d'Arc, though, decided that it was going to be won with fighting spirit, and so, against the king's orders, she took her army to Paris to liberate the city on September 8, 1429, and once her and her men stood before the high walls of Paris, Jeanne d'Arc was shot with a crossbow through the leg. But you've seen this movie before. You know how it goes. Jeanne d'Arc, man, she she didn't. No arrow, no comeback, not this time. Paris was not Orléans. 30 feet high stone walls were not the same as some siege. This was a massive city and not to be taken by waving a banner, no matter how much morale it boosts. Jeanne's men knew when they were outmatched, and while the injured Jeanne d'Arc screamed for them to stand and fight, her men dragged her off the battlefield and retreated from Paris. The battle, which wasn't much of a battle in the first place, it was lost. And once Charles found out that Jeanne had defied his orders, that she attacked Paris and endangered his peace talks, he was furious, and he completely cut her and her army off. No more supplies, no more food, no more weapons, no more nothing. As far as he was concerned, Jeanne d'Arc was no longer an agent of the crown, but a rogue agent. Just some crazy woman following the voices in her head, but definitely not following the king's orders. Charles turned his back on the teenager that had made him king. But it didn't matter to Jeanne d'Arc. She wasn't in it for the king's approval, she was in it for the people of France, and she kept on fighting. On May 23, 1430, now 18 years old, Jeanne d'Arc took her army to Compiègne to defeat more of the Anglo-Burgundian forces and chase them off French lands. But this time Jeanne got rushed on the battlefield and found herself behind enemy lines. She was thrown off her white horse and then captured by the Burgundians. And now remember that Burgundy were allies of England, but currently trying to become allies of France, or at least not remain enemies of King Charles. So they captured Jeanne d'Arc in the hopes of getting a valuable hostage. She was, after all, literally King Charles' savior, so surely her safety would matter to him and help the Burgundians in their peace negotiations. So when Burgundy told King Charles that they had Jeanne d'Arc hostage, he said,
"Doesn't look like anything to me."
The official stance of France on Jeanne d'Arc was that she was literally irrelevant. Do whatever you want with her. But there was a third party to whom Jeanne d'Arc was very relevant. A third party that suffered a lot of losses at the hands of this young woman that they believed was possessed by the devil. England. To England, Jeanne d'Arc was worth a lot of money, and so Burgundy sold Jeanne d'Arc to them, and once she heard that she would fall into the hands of the English, Jeanne d'Arc committed suicide by throwing herself off of a tower. But sadly, she survived, because what the English had in store for her was much worse. On March 25, 1431, they held a trial for Jeanne d'Arc in Rouen, a trial in which they charged her with 70 misdemeanors, mostly heresy, blasphemy, her being the devil, possessed by the devil, and maybe the odd old-school witch charge thrown in there just for good measure, you know, the usual. But Jeanne d'Arc was way too smart for their idiotic charges and embarrassed them at every court hearing. And obviously, we don't have a transcript of the proceedings, but I imagine that the court hearings went kind of like this.
Listen, you little wiseacre. I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
It was a sham. It was just them trying to find a reason to destroy Jeanne d'Arc's reputation as some divine, God's chosen girl. They were just trying to get away with killing her and calling it God's justice. And then, finally, they found a charge that stuck beyond a shadow of a doubt. She was charged with dressing in men's clothing, because in the Bible it says, "A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this." So this was heresy of the highest order, and Jeanne d'Arc couldn't deny it, nor use her wit to talk her way out of this one, because she was wearing men's clothing as she was accused of wearing men's clothing. She was guilty. And with that undeniable charge, after almost a month of proceedings, during which Jeanne d'Arc was kept in chains in a filthy prison cell, her head was shaven, she was starved and treated like trash by the guards, all in an attempt to break her, after she fell sick and was on the verge of death, asking to see a priest but was refused. After they had utterly humiliated this 19-year-old girl for humiliating them in battle and now humiliating them in court, after a month of this, the English had finally found a reason to execute her. The girl had the audacity to wear men's clothing. So the verdict was this: Jeanne d'Arc was to be burned alive for her crimes against God, unless she signs a confession. And at this point, Jeanne d'Arc's will, man, was broken. I don't care what they show you in the movies. Few people can withstand living in chains in a dirty, rotten cell under constant harassment for a month, and even fewer are not terrified of the idea of being burned alive. So Jeanne d'Arc signed the confession, which included a clause that forbid her to ever wear men's clothing again, and if she does, the punishment will be death by fire. But of course, England was never going to be satisfied with her just living out her days as a woman. No, Jeanne d'Arc had to die. Not only that, Jeanne d'Arc, who everybody knew claimed to have been chosen by God, she had to die in a manner that convinces everybody that she went against God's will, that she was a liar all along and an agent of the devil. So eventually some guards came into Jeanne d'Arc's cell, stripped her naked, and let her know that the sight of her naked makes them want to do things that would definitely mean she won't be a virgin anymore, and that the only thing she could do to turn them off was to put on some men's clothing that they happily provided for her. And so Jeanne d'Arc put on some men's clothes, and with that, she officially insulted God, broke the agreement, and was sentenced to death by fire. On May 30th, 1431, in Rouen, Jeanne d'Arc was tied to a pyre and burned alive. Truly burned alive. There was no one that eased her passing with a mercy kill before the flames got to her, as was often the case in those times. Nah, with Jeanne d'Arc, they wanted to hear her scream as the flames burned her flesh. And with her last screams, the 19-year-old girl was heard begging to the saints that had tasked her with her mission. She screamed and begged to Saint Michael to come and save her. But he never did. Jeanne d'Arc, the brave teenager who undoubtedly forever and significantly changed history by setting up the unification of France, died alone, burning to death, betrayed by the country she saved.